Right here in the upper right corner of every sound in either layer, you're going to have access to the filter section. And the filter section is a pretty remarkable section for shaping your sound. The really cool thing about the filter in Omnisphere is that it can be applied to both sample and synth-based oscillators. So you can use your own audio and you can use samples inside, kind of routed through the filter section of an analog synth. It's a really creative way to sculpt your sounds. And I like to use the word sculpt because when you're thinking about filters and subtractive synthesis, you're really acting as kind of an audio sculptor. You're taking this piece of source material and you're kind of hacking away at bits of it to get to the sound or sculpture that you want on the inside of all that material. That's really what subtractive synthesis is all about. You're taking away stuff you don't want to hear so that you're left with only the stuff you do want to hear. I've deactivated the second layer so that we're dealing with one sound, and it's always good if you're going to start learning about filters to start with a pretty simple sound. So I've got a synth-based oscillator. Now, while that might not sound so simple, it's a fractal buzz. That wave looks pretty wacky. I'm not dealing with samples right now. I'm dealing with just a nice synth wave sound. And what I'm going to do next is activate the filter section by turning it on. I don't hear much of a change yet because I'm going to start dealing with some of the elements of this filter section. I've got a cutoff frequency here, the knob for cutoff. And what that's going to do is it's going to pick the area or the frequency at which it's going to allow certain sound to pass or deny certain sound the right to pass. And that all depends on what kind of filter I'm using. So if I choose a specific kind, a common one, just like a regular low pass filter. Now, everything below the cutoff frequency is going to pass by, and everything above is going to be cut off. Now, if I have the cutoff turned all the way up, well then nothing is going to be cut off because it's at its maximum level. But as I lower it, you'll hear that high frequency information being denied passage. So now you're left with just that lower stuff. And as I raise it back up again, the cutoff frequency, you hear those upper level harmonics, the higher end of the tone getting put back in. Next to the cutoff knob is a resonance knob. And the resonance controls the resonance knee, which is sometimes called because the graph, it looks like a little bit of a knee. Basically, where that cutoff is falling off, you now have a little bump in the frequency where it actually goes up before it falls off. So instead of saying at 1 kilohertz my sound just goes away, at 1 kilohertz my sound goes up a little bit for a few decibels, and then it goes away. And that will really bring out some interesting harmonics. Especially as I start to lower the cutoff. You really hear that dramatic change now if I take the resonance knee out of it. Because it's sharper. It's increasing before it decreases. So at that point of cutoff, it's getting increased. Pretty neat. Key tracking is basically from a certain point, will the filter be engaged more dramatically or opened up more? So a lot of synths will make middle C or C5, that point, and you'll hear as I go up, if I turn key tracking off, the filter is open the whole time. If I put it somewhere in the middle, and it really gets opened up and allowing all that high frequency stuff, which is kind of hurting my ears through. And finally, I've got an envelope control, and you can shape your synth filter with the envelope. This will determine how much of that envelope is applied. So if I start applying some of the envelope, you'll get this attack, decay, sustain, and release. You'll hear the filter be applied over time. Now, if I do that same thing with no envelope depth, my filter doesn't evolve. If I add a little envelope depth, then it evolves over time in this envelope shape, which we'll get into a little later on. I've got a gain adjustment. If I'm working with a certain filter, it might actually decrease the gain of my sound because I'm sculpting away frequencies and the sound might get a little quieter. So I might want to adjust the gain accordingly, or vice versa. As you've heard, as I start to add a lot of resonance and let the filter be wide open, I can get some annoyingly high frequencies in there. So I might want to bring the gain down to compensate. So here's no filter. And it can kind of smooth out the difference between that. And then you've got a variant for different variants on the filter. Essentially what it's going to do is open up the filter differently in each ear, giving you a really cool kind of phased out thing between your two headphones. If you've got your speakers separated, or if you're wearing a good pair of headphones, you can really hear the effect. So you'll hear it kind of go back and forth between the ears, the filter opening up at different rates in each ear. Well, we've got a lot more to talk about the filters, especially when we zoom in to really take a closer look. So let's do that next.